How are you? Hope the weekend was good, as it never seems to be long enough. Welcome back, and thank you so much for joining us on FOXSOUL's Black Report. I'm Courtney Hicks.
And I'm Nicordelai Corte. You know, each day we can't wait to get behind this desk to take you on a journey across Black America. We know that there are a lot of places you can go for news that focus too narrowly on our blues, but right here at FOXSOUL's Black Report, we aim to share stories that reflect our rhythm and blues, rich with informed perspective and analysis. And with this in mind, President Biden's student debt forgiveness is halted yet again. An expert explains what happens now. Plus, we're talking to celebrity hairstylist about the effects of relaxers on Black women. And Michael B. Jordan surprises several Atlanta HBCUs.
All right, up first, former President Obama is ready to hit the campaign trail and use his influence to keep Senate Democrats in power and protect presidential appointments. Obama will make appearances this week in support of Democratic candidates in key battleground states. That includes Nevada, New Hampshire, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Illinois, and Florida. As midterm campaigning enters the final stretch, you can expect to see the former president in TV ads and pit stops in crucial swing states. Obama's TV ads plan to focus largely on abortion rights and the fate of American democracy.
Election day is right around the corner, and I want to be clear about what's at stake. Our fundamental rights are on the ballot, especially women's reproductive rights. That's because earlier this year, the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. Now, extreme Republicans are pushing to ban abortion nationwide. The good news is that we have the power to forge a different future. If we elect more Democrats to Congress, President Biden can codify Roe v. Wade and protect abortion rights. So don't sit this election out. Make a plan to vote right now at iwillvote.com. Election day is right.
Obama will make campaign stops in Atlanta on October 28th and in Detroit, right here in Detroit, on October 29th. That's according to a statement from his office. Now, the former president is also scheduled to hold another rally on October 29th in Milwaukee. 3 days later, on November 1st, Obama will campaign with Democrats in Las Vegas. And herein lies, will this make a difference? We know in the past he has had the magic touch. The Democrats seem to be, either in a dead heat with opponents or behind the eight ball. Do you think his presence on the campaign trail will really make a difference?
You know, President Obama is one of the most effective messengers that the Democratic Party has. And he has a magical way of being able to cut through the noise and really make it plain for everyday people. There was a poll that I saw this morning, I think it was an NBC News poll, that suggested that one of the major issues on the minds of voters is the economy. It's pocketbook issues. And so I think there are a lot of folks that thought that, codifying Roe v. Wade, running on that message, was going to motivate and, quite frankly, animate more voters. I think we might have hit the ceiling in terms of how many folks are really motivated by that issue. And so, let's stay tuned to see, how much people are motivated by pocketbook issues. You would think that with Republican states, the 6 Republican states really making a play to halt President Biden's student loan forgiveness program, you would think that Democrats would be adjusting their message
just a bit
these next 2 weeks to make sure that people connect the dots between that and their pocketbook.
And the Republicans out the gate, it's always been about crime for them. So it's going to be interesting to see if President Obama can hit that pulse, if there is something new pumping in the minds and the emotions of Democrats, and hopefully he can tap into that and help these candidates along.
We shall see. Certainly a lot on the line for Democrats and for the country in this midterm election. But moving to Minneapolis, J. Alexander Kwang and Tao Tao, 2 former Minneapolis police officers charged in George Floyd's death, are heading to trial. This will be the 3rd and likely final criminal proceeding in a killing that mobilized protesters worldwide against racial injustice in policing. Now, Kwang, who is Black, and Tao, who is Hmong American, are each charged with aiding and abetting second-degree unintentional murder and aiding and abetting second-degree manslaughter. Now, prosecutors will have to prove they intentionally helped Derek Chauvin, the Minneapolis police officer convicted of George Floyd's murder. Kwang and Tao don't have to prove that they intended to kill Floyd or cause him great bodily harm. Now, the former officers have already been convicted of federal counts for violating Floyd's civil rights and have begun serving those sentences.
And a federal appeals court has ruled to halt President Biden's student loan debt forgiveness plan. Applications should have begun processing and loan balances should have dropped over the weekend. Now, according to the Washington Post, it appeared that Biden's administration successfully avoided legal challenges amid Republicans at its debt relief plan. A U.S. district judge dismissed the state's lawsuit for lack of standing. The same day, Supreme Court Justice Coney Barrett denied a separate lawsuit by conservatives on behalf of taxpayers, the Taxpayers Association, which argued that Biden does not have the authority to broadly waive debt and that the debt relief was unconstitutional. Now, despite this new development, the U.S. Education Secretary said that Saturday, Biden administration is moving, quote, full speed ahead in preparing for the implementation of its plans for widespread student debt forgiveness.
Now to discuss further, we welcome National Black Justice Coalition Executive Director Dr. David Johns, a former teacher, a U.S. Senate aide to Ted Kennedy, and former head of the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans under the Obama administration. Welcome to FOXSOUL's Black Report, Dr. Johns.
Thank you. It's good to be with you again, brother.
It's good to see you. You know, of the 40 million Americans who are eligible for relief, we know that more than 60% are Pell Grant recipients who are eligible to receive up to $20,000 in debt cancellation. But one number that may not make the headlines as often as it should, 71% of Black borrowers are Pell Grant recipients. What do you make of these 6 Republican-led states' determination to block student debt forgiveness?
Yeah, before I answer that, let's start with the assets, which I want to encourage everyone who is listening to this, who might hear this, to go to studentaid.gov. Again, that's studentaid.gov. If you have a question, you think you might have at some point taken a student loan, apply. You might be eligible for one of the prior existing 6 public service loan forgiveness programs, or become eligible after the courts make a determination around the most recent efforts of the Biden-Harris administration. We should all be clear that everyone should also go vote. What we're talking about now, the halting of what we would have seen over the weekend in terms of immediate relief to people in their financial situation, is a result of 6 states that are prioritizing profits over people. These are 6 states that are shucking and shilling for loan service providers, the companies that make money off of following up and taking interest on the loans that you paid. And it's appropriate that we're having this conversation after you showed the clip of still my favorite president, Barack Hussein Obama, because in 2010, when I worked in the U.S. Senate for then Senator Ted Kennedy, we passed as a part of the ARRA package higher ed reforms that took away the role of some of the loan service providing service organizations and allow the Department of Education to do that work using public funds. And so there are blueprints for ways that we can continue to do more. But if anybody hears me say anything, go to studentaid.gov and apply today.
Why do you think, but David, why do you think that they, meaning the Republicans in these 6 Republican-controlled states, why do you think that they hate student debt forgiveness so much, but love PPP loan forgiveness? You know, which benefits, you know, a lot of folks, more than the $20,000 for Pell Grant recipients. But, you know, if we're talking about PPP loan recipients just in Congress, you know, we've seen headlines where they've had hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in forgiveness for PPP loans, but they are staunchly against this student debt forgiveness. Why, Sway? Why?
Listen, Adiyah, say you got to do a thing, beloved, and it's because white supremacy protects itself. It has never been a question about the extent to which public resources should be made available to those in positions of privilege. You named the most recent, which is the ability to apply for PPE loans or support. But there are decades of evidence of members of the United States Senate and other legislative bodies leveraging resources to support their farms or to otherwise support their businesses that indicate that they understand how democracy works, especially when it benefits them. But in this moment, we are talking about individuals who are often not in positions of privilege, who have not been supported by the radical right, who are not centered in any of the attempts of the Republican Party at this moment to weaken democracy. And all of us should be clear about that, which is why the second thing I hope people heard me say is that everybody should go vote. I can't say who to vote for. I'm talking to this moment, not in my 501c3 hat, but as a citizen who cares about democracy, everyone please go vote.
That's right. And we care very much about democracy here on Fox Soul's Black Report and appreciate you pounding that message. You know, on Saturday, we heard U.S. Education Secretary Cardona called these lawsuits to block President Biden's debt relief program, quote unquote, baseless. He went on to say that the administration was, quotes, not deterred. Is it just me, or does it feel like Secretary Cardona and the Biden administration are really willing to go toe to toe with Republicans on this issue?
Yeah, I mean, they really don't have a choice. We're in the middle of a midterm election season, and if this administration has any hopes of being able to continue to lead, this is an all hands on deck effort. I want to be clear that this play has been run before. We saw this with governors when they were attempting to make President Obama a one-term president who did not want to take relief until there were natural disasters. Think Hurricane Katrina. We saw this most recently with the weather storm that impacted Florida. And so we should expect for Republican leaders to switch when it benefits them or when it's politically convenient. And we should all support people, regardless of their party, who support democracy, who show up for the least of us, or who Howard Thurman would call the dispossessed.
Speaking of supporting democracy, Dr. Johns, we're now almost 2 weeks away from the midterm election. Do you expect that this latest challenge to Biden's student debt relief program, do you expect it's going to motivate young voters and infrequent voters to turn out? I mean, you know, what's your message to young Black voters and Black infrequent voters?
Yeah, I see you. I love you. I appreciate you and all you're doing for democracy. I think a lot about Sister Bell Hooks. Her book is Over My Shoulder, who talked about how often as a result of how our public school system works, people forget that it is our obligation to fight to defend democracy in every generation. And there are so many young people and infrequent voters, however they are termed, who show up and show out in spite of voter suppression and intimidation tactics, some that we've seen decades heretofore and some that are new and innovative. And so I'm really heartened by the polling numbers coming out of states like Georgia, where there have been more than 700,000 early ballots cast. And I want people to hear my heart when I say keep it up, keep your foot on the necks of people who are attempting to destroy democracy.
Well, keep your foot on the necks of folks. That is something that Dr. David Johns and the folks at National Black Justice Coalition are unafraid to do. We appreciate you for your time. And please come back to Fox Soul's Black Report soon.
I look forward to it. Thank you both.
Thank you, sir.
All right, some good information, Nicola. Thanks so much for that.
Yeah, that was really great. It was really great to see Dr. Johns really making it plain and making it very clear that over the course of the next couple weeks, folks have an opportunity to make their voice heard by showing up at the polls. I mean, that is critically important. And there's a lot on the line. Yeah, and tossing out that information at the top of the interview, and what that sounds like to me is you have, regardless of what the government, the ping-ponging back and forth with the fate of our accounts, if you will, in their hands, to stay proactive and keep yourself up to date with what is or is not happening, or what you can control right now in regards to correspondence and what you need to know. So that was great. Because that's real money. It is $10,000 to $20,000. You know, we could debate. I mean, there's a lot of people say it could be more, right? But $10,000 to $20,000 will help. That's real money. Yeah. Cash money. Cash money. And speaking of cash money, Black women hoping to become mothers by IVF might encounter some issues if the preference is to have a baby that looks like them. This takes lots of money, too. A recent report by the Washington Post reveals that sperm banks across the country are facing a shortage of Black donors. And while it may seem like an easy decision to simply select a donor of another race, preparing to raise a mixed baby without firsthand knowledge of other cultures seems to pose another set of challenges for parents and the child.
They made a mockery of justice, and I swore then that if I ever get a chance, I would do my best to make life better for African Americans.
The unveiling of the statue coincides with the release this month of the movie Till, which focuses on Mamie Elizabeth Till Mobley's trauma over her son's death and her transformation into a civil rights activist.
That's right. You know, the statue is not far from where two white men kidnapped and killed the black teenager over accusations he had flirted with a white woman in a country store. The lynching took place in 1955, and it became a catalyst for the civil rights movement after Till's mother insisted on an open casket funeral in Chicago. The 9-foot-tall bronze statue depicts Till in slacks, a dress shirt, and a tie, with one of his hands on that brim of his hat. The Till statue is about 10 miles from what's left of the country store where Till encountered his accuser.
Yet again, another example of how important this story is and will continue to be for generations to come. There's so many layers, and each one of those layers brings yet another lesson, more insight, especially as the politics, if you will, of this case continues on in our court system. And
it's also interesting. I mean, you know, so you started with, you know, sort of the story about the shortage of black sperm donors. Mm-hmm. And one of the interesting insights that you shared was, you know, how a number of folks are a little reluctant to, you know, take sperm from, you know, somebody that's not of the same race as them, that's not black, because they really have to think about, you know, how do you raise a mixed race kid?
That's right.
Right. And so connecting the dots, I mean, whether you're raising a mixed race kid or raising a black kid in certain parts of the country, where white supremacy violence still looms supreme, you know, these are clear and present issues in our community.
I would agree. And, you know, it's going to be, again, up to us to continue to monitor stories like this, going back to the sperm donor. This was a big conversation over the weekend that the Washington Post broke, and really think through these decisions. It's already complicated enough raising our own, and if you were to incorporate yet another culture, it could be even more complicated.
Yeah. I mean, it's just another example of, you know, how race looms large, you know, in how we make decisions about our family planning, and how we keep our family members safe, right? For black folks, you know, race is sort of omnipresent. And I think those two stories back to back really illustrate that.
Yeah, and speaking of such, racism rears its ugly head yet again, this time in Houston. More on Fox Soul's Black Report after this.